notice that Adam doesn't call her Eve, he calls her woman, right? Finally, at line 375, right, we will have Adam folding, and he will say it. All right, you're going to do this thing. The word trial gets used several times in this exchange. Go in thy native innocence. Rely on what thou hast of virtue. Summon all, for God towards thee hath done his part. Do thine. And at line 376, so spoke the patriarch of mankind, and thus forewarned, chiefly by what thy own last reasoning words touched only, that our trial, when least sought, may find us both perhaps far less prepared. The willinger I go, nor much expect. A foe so proud will first the weaker seek, so bent the more shall shame him his repulse. Eve, as she leaves, and these are the last words she speaks as she goes, as she withdraws, she says, Satan will come, he can't come after me. I'm the weaker. He's going to come after you, the stronger, because he is a proud and a bold enemy. The ironies, of course, begin to stack up. And we're told, thus saying at line 385, 386, from her husband's hand, her hand, soft she withdrew, and off she goes. Now, this thing about hands, of course, is huge. And when the hands separate, we realize it's about to happen. At line 398, Adam knows. We're told, desiring more her to stay, oft he to her his charge a quick return repeated. She to him is oft engaged to be returned by noon amid the bower. And all things in best order to invite noontime repast or afternoon's repose. Oh, line 404, much deceived, much failing, hapless Eve of thy presumed return, event perverse, thou never from that hour in paradise foundst either sweet repast or sound repose. Such ambush, hid among sweet flowers and shades, waited with hellish rancor imminent, to intercept thy way, or send thee back, despoiled of innocence, of faith, of bliss. Now, we cannot help but think, again, because we're making this relationship to our study of Shakespeare. Think about Lady Macbeth in the play Macbeth in Act 1, Scene 5. Remember what she says to her husband? Remember how Macbeth is constructed around those famous lines from 1:4 of Duncan. There is no art to find the mind's construction in the face. He was a gentleman on whom I placed an absolute trust, talking about the Thane of Cawdor who ends up to be a traitor. Then a little bit later, Lady Macbeth will say to her man, we're going to jack Duncan tonight. Your face, my lord, is as a book where men may read strange matters. In other words, you look guilty. You need to clean it up. And then she says it. Do you remember those lines? I cannot help but believe that these lines are in Milton's mind as he's writing these lines. She says it to Jack Duncan. What is it? You got it. Look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it. You go out to the garden, you reach down to pick the flower, and of course from behind the flower there's the snake. Bam! We're going to play the same game all over again. Line 425. We will see Satan now, who will spy Eve. Spying, of course, meaning to look on. And in that moment, he is, we're told at line 465, I wish I could read all these lines, that Satan is completely blown away when he sees Eve there standing among the flowers. And in fact, it makes him stupidly good. The power of Eve's beauty is so amazing. And at line 473, an interesting soliloquy. Thoughts, he says, whither have ye led me? Very much reminding us what Brutus will say in Julius Caesar to Cassius in Act 1, Scene 2, line 65, where would thou lead me? Right? And then on we go. He says it. Hate, not love, nor hope of paradise for hell, here to taste of pleasure, but all pleasure to destroy, save what is in destroying. Other joy to me is lost. 479. There are a number of losts in Paradise Lost. There are a number of falls in Paradise Lost. We've mentioned, of course, a number of them. 494. Satan as serpent will approach Eve. It's an amazing thing. He's going to use love and flattery to ruin her. right? Now, a surging maze at 497, 498, right? Pleasing shape before the snake is cursed. Apparently, Milton wants us to believe that snakes have the capacity to be able to walk erect. And his first words at lines 532 are going to be all about flattery. Wonder not, sovereign mistress, if perhaps thou canst to art so wonder. Much less arm thy looks, the heaven of mildness with disdain displeased, and I approach thee thus and gaze insatiate. He cannot say enough how amazingly beautiful she is. And then he asks it at 546. It's an amazing bit of rhetoric that Milton will create for our serpent to speak. And at line 546 he asks, who is it that sees and appreciates you? At line 552, Eve is most blown away by the fact that a snake can talk language. She says it. What may this mean? Language of man, pronounced by tongue of brute, and human sense expressed? The first at least of these I thought denied to beasts, whom God to their creation day created mute to all articulate sound? And again, let's point it out. Milton, the amazing linguist, apparently never really does give much question to how is it possible that we are having language at all, and more particularly, what language? Language leads to the fall, we should point out. Does it matter which language was being spoken? I think that's an interesting question for you to run down and think about on your own. 562, Eve calls it a miracle that the snake can speak. 567, Satan will then begin, the guileful tempter will begin to play the game. And it's simple. At 576, he calls it a goodly tree he ate from that allows him to be able to do this. At line 585, we find out that in fact it is apples. It's interesting. Oftentimes Christian readers of Genesis 3 will point out, the Bible doesn't say anything about what the fruit actually was. And of course, most people will call it apples. I've said this before in earlier lectures. This poem is so influential in the way we think about this story. It is apples for Milton, and therefore from here on out, anytime you see that apple, you immediately think about the whole idea of temptation. Think about that powerful scene in one of the very earliest Disney films of Snow White, when that apple is held out by that wicked witch. At line 611, we're told that this apple Satan says, led me to not only gaze, but to worship you. At line 615, Eve is amazed. She wants to know, where grows this tree? And then at line 631, she says it. Lead then, said Eve. Lead me to the tree. He leading swiftly, rowled, this word again coming back, we can see him moving, right? Entangles, and made intricate seam straight. And the minute that we have this word seam, right, we think of Hamlet and his comment. Remember Mama in 1-2 and Hamlet 1-2? Hamlet, why do you seem so upset? Nay, madams, not seams. I have then within which passeth show these but the trappings and the suits of woe. Of course here, notice Satan, the great deceiver, can make things seem straight that are in fact not straight at all. Satan as questioner, Satan later as orator at line 670. We'll get there in a moment. At 648, the serpent Satan will take Eve to the tree. And when she sees the tree, she immediately knows. Eve knows, uh-oh, this is a tree I'm forbidden to eat from. Serpent, she says it at line 647 and following, we might have spared our coming hither, fruitless to me, though fruit be here to excess, the credit of whose virtue rest with thee. These, of course, this word fruitless is going to come back at the very last lines of Book 9. And where of course, fruit and flowers are these powerful symbols. At line 648 now to 656, she says, but of this tree we may not taste nor touch. God so commanded and left that command, sole daughter of his voice. The rest we live law to ourselves. Our reason is our law. A disturbing, ironic line. Of course, the tempter now will come back at line 656 with the word indeed. Note how the questions will begin. Hath God then said of the fruit of all these garden trees you shall not eat, yet Lord's declared of all in earth or air? If you own your own copy of Paradise Lost, I recommend that you just start circling the question marks, and you'll be blown away by the number of them. Notice even at line 666, the tempter, but with new show of zeal and love to man, and indignation at his wrong, new part puts on, and so to passion moved, fluctuates disturbed. In other words, bolder Satan, we are told, begins to play the role of a new part, a more bold part. And then at line 670, as when of old some orator renowned in Athens or free Rome, where eloquence flourished, sense mute to some great cause addressed, stood in himself collected. That is to say, do you remember what Socrates will say in Republic 8:9 about the tyrant, the despot? How is it that he gets to run the world? Language. An amazing speaker. At line, of course, think also, just as one last comment, this will be Plato's critique of artists in Republic 10, right? That they lie, and therefore they're dangerous. Here, of course, Satan playing the game. At 684, he says, Queen of this universe, do not believe those rigid threats of death. Ye shall not die. How should ye? By the fruit? It gives you life to knowledge. By the threatener? Look on me. Me who have touched and tasted, yet both live and life more perfect have attained than fate meant me, by venturing higher than my lot. This notion of venturing, the discoverer higher than my lot. Shall that be shut to man, which to the beast is open? Or will God incense his ire for such a petty trespass? Let's point out, the serpent knows, and Satan says it. I know that this is a trespass, this is sin, but it's petty. It's not that big of a deal. And not praise, rather, your dauntless virtue, whom the pain of death denounced, whether thing death be, deterred not from achieving what might lead to happier life. You may be happier with knowledge. Knowledge of good and evil? Of good? How just? Of evil? What if what is evil be real? Why not known, since easier shunned? God therefore cannot hurt ye and be just. You're hearing, this is the question of theodicy, right? Nor just, not God, nor feared then, nor obeyed. Your fear itself of death removes the fear. Why then was this forbade? Why but to awe? Why but to keep ye low and ignorant his worshippers? He knows that in the day ye eat thereof, your eyes that seem so clear, yet are but dim, shall perfectly be then opened and cleared, and ye shall be as gods. Of course, quoting directly from the Genesis 3 account. Well, let's just point out to line 709. This is brilliant rhetoric at line 716. And what are gods that men may not become as they, participating godlike food? We immediately think of ambrosia, don't we? And line 716, to continue down through line 732. The gods are first, and that advantage used on our behalf, that all from them proceeds. I question it, for this fair earth I see, warmed by the sun, producing every kind and nothing. If they all things who enclose knowledge of good and evil in this tree, that whoso eats thereof forthwith attains wisdom without their leave. And wherein leaves the offense that man should thus attain to know? And again, notice all the question marks. What can your knowledge hurt him, or this tree impart against his will, if all be his? Or is it envy? And can envy dwell in heavenly breasts? These and many more causes import your need of this fair fruit. Goddess humane, reach then and freely taste. Line 732. Well, this is too easy. Line 733, he ended, and his words replete with guile into her heart. Too easy one, in entrance one. Fixed on the fruit, she gazed. Now, let's put this in our notes. This is the genius of Milton. He takes the 26 some odd lines of Genesis 3 and he turns it into this amazing moment. Watch how all 5 of the senses are solicited for Eve as she begins to think about this fruit. Again, I go back to that earlier question in my lecture. the last time you did something you know you weren't supposed to do, and you had to somehow kind of find your way to rationalize it in your mind. All the games that you play. Take a look at how Eve will play this game. Which to behold might tempt alone, and in her, so she looks, and in her ears the sound yet rung of his persuasive words, hearing, impregnated with reason. Think about that, impregnated, and go back to the opening invocation and the words, and pregnant. With reason to her seeming, and with truth. Meanwhile the hour of noon drew on, and waked an eager appetite, raised by the smell, so savory of that fruit, which with desire inclinable now grown to touch, or taste solicited her longing eye, yet first pausing a while, thus to herself she mused. Eve's self-talk. And she begins to think about all of the different reasons why this is not something wrong. And finally, at line 745, great are thy virtues, doubtless best of fruits, though kept from man and worthy to be admired, whose taste too long forborne at first to say, gave elocution to the mute, and taught the tongue not made for speech to speak thy praise. Thy praise he also who forbids thy use, conceals not from us, naming thee the tree of knowledge. Knowledge both of good and evil, forbids us then to taste, but his forbidding commends thee more, while it infers the good by thee communicated in our want. For good unknown sure is not bad, or had and yet unknown is as not had at all. In plain, then, what forbids he but to know? Forbids us good, forbids us to be wise. Such prohibitions bind not. Again, I said earlier, one of the ways to read Eve's comments here is that she knows what she's about to do is wrong, but she's convinced herself this is the right thing. Knowledge, and more knowledge, is always good. But if death bind us, with afterbinds, what profits then our inward freedom? What's the point of being free if you can't use your freedom? In the day we eat of this fair fruit, our doom is we shall die. How dies the serpent? Look, the serpent ate from the fruit. He didn't die. He hath eaten and lives and knows and speaks and reasons and discerns irrational till then. For us alone was death invented? Or to us denied this intellectual food? For beasts reserved? For beasts it seems, yet that one beast which first hath tasted envies not, but brings with joy the good befallen him, author and suspect, friendlier to man, far from deceit or guile. What fear I then? Rather, what know to fear under this ignorance of good and evil, of God or death or law of penalty? Here grows the cure of all, this fruit divine, fair to the eye, inviting to the taste, of virtue to make wise. What hinders then to reach and feed at once both body and mind? So saying, line 781, her rash hand in evil hour forth reaching to the fruit, she plucked, she ate, earth felt the wound, and nature from her seat, sighing through all her works, gave signs of woe, that all was lost. By the way, we should point out that in the English of Milton's day, the it and set is actually a rhyme. Milton will rhyme at the moment that Eve will eat from the tree. Of course, all is lost. Again, earth will continue now. Earth and nature, earth felt the wound, and nature from her seat sighing through all her works gave signs of woe, that all was lost. This is the pivotal moment of the text, right? Milton wants us to appreciate the fact that at the moment she eats from the forbidden fruit, everything is lost. This explains all of the evil, pain, suffering in the world. And again, the obvious question is, if this is such a pivotal moment in the history of the world, if this explains so much, then why is it not the case that we don't hear more about this story, for example, from the words of Jesus Christ? The gospel accounts never once have Christ mentioned this story, and yet this is the story of all stories from Milton. It's an interesting question. Well, what happens as soon as she eats? 796, She turns around and immediately begins to worship the tree. We think about, of course, that famous line from Romans 1 where we're told that the created will worship the creation instead of the creator. At line 803, she says, I grow mature in knowledge as the gods who all things know. Through others' envy what they cannot give, for had the gift been theirs, it had not here thus grown. Experience next to thee I owe best guide. We immediately think of Blake's Songs of Innocence, Songs of Experience. Not following thee I have remained in ignorance. Thou openest wisdom's way and givest access. Through secret she retire, and I, perhaps, am secret. Heaven is not as high, and remote to see from thence distinct each thing on earth, and other care perhaps may have diverted from continual watch. Our great forbidder. Now she's talking about God, safe with all his spies about him. But now she asks, but to Adam, in what sort shall I appear? Shall I to him make known as yet my change, and give him to partake full happiness with me? Or rather not, but keep the odds of knowledge in my power without co-partner. It is a fascinating moment. At the moment Eve eats from the forbidden fruit, and any number of people have pointed out that yes, of course, the word Eve and the word evil come to mind so easily from this point on, of course. But our first question is, how am I going to tell Adam? Hey, should I tell Adam about? Now, notice the patriarchy, the change. She has now moved equal with Adam and even above Adam. Should I tell Adam? She decides that she will share her knowledge with Adam at line 831. Adam shall share with me in bliss or woe. In other words, she says, it's simple. If I die and Adam doesn't die, God's going to create another Eve. I can't have any of that. So I'm going back and I'm going to tell Eve. At line 840,